And thank you for the privilege of telling colleagues a little bit about the background to how this tool came about. It essentially started in September 2014 when we were attending an employer's workshop on maternity protection. And one of the things we did in that workshop was that we did a comparative analysis on the different maternity regimes across the SADC countries. And that resulted in a report, and I have a copy here just to show you. And it's no coincidence, I think, that it was a maternity report that we were looking at. And there were a lot of women from across SADC that were involved in the development of this guide. And I think what happened essentially was that we were sitting and discussing the merits of looking at other laws and saying, how do we assess the different laws across the different countries? And it was from there that the idea took root. There were a number of people who on this call today who were part of that meeting back in 2014. Lindiwe Sepamolo, Rose Anang, who was the employer specialist at the time, Irene, there was Norman Mulele, Weani, Dichava, and it's actually incredible to say that we find ourselves now many years down the line, but that little idea actually gave rise to this tool. Essentially, the tool took root from there in 2016. It was endorsed as part of the SPSF's strategic framework as a tool, and work took place in terms of desktop work to try and assemble all the information. And I was the original consultant together with Geraldine Masunungura, and we did the desktop research. And that completed round about the end of 2016. And at that time, Maria Machado Ellis took over as the employer specialist for the region. And she immediately picked up on this tool and said, we've got to bring it alive. We've got to take it forward. And it was under her leadership that we put together a workshop, which was in January 2017. There was representation again from across the region to validate the material. And there were two key issues that came out of that. The one was essentially that we needed to go beyond pure labor guides and look at a little bit more general information around the labor regimes. And the second was that we needed to make sure that we covered the different languages in the region, and that we popularize and communicate this tool and find a way to launch it more broadly. And Audra Wilson-Max was brought on board, who's been behind the scenes, pulling this all together and driving it along, and who has been putting the digital tool together. And I think essentially what we were trying to do was to develop a practical set of guidelines for businesses so that if they wanted to do business in the region, they would know where to find the laws at a glance. They wouldn't have to go through a whole lot of different instruments and try and work out which ones were applicable. They would be able to understand how to practically implement. And this would be available both for those within the region, but also international investment. And so there were a number of objectives that sat behind. I was reflecting on that because they still are very, very applicable for today's purposes. So first of all, it was to actually help businesses as well as obviously employees and government and other people that are doing business in the region to understand the laws and to find a way to access them in a very accessible and credible format. The second part was to obviously promote compliance with the laws as well as with the principles of decent work. The third was to facilitate business and trade in the region, and obviously that would facilitate and enable employment. The fourth was to promote certainty as well as policy coherence and assist the different countries when they were developing labor laws to have a point of reference across the different countries if they so wish to do so. And then the fifth was to actually develop confidence in the labor law regime within SADC. And the scope essentially was around labor relations, around minimum standards, and it expanded further to look at issues relating to migrant workers, occupational health and safety, employment equity, and social security. So that was the initial scope of what was developed. And to a large extent, the tool was developed and it was updated, the material was updated. And then what happened a few months ago is that Maria and Audra found a fabulous opportunity to actually make it much more relevant under COVID times. And they brought together a team under Business for South Africa. We were able to access labor law expertise as well as business expertise and legal advice from firms across the SADC countries. And I wonder if that list is available so that we can actually thank the people that came together to provide the resources pro bono. There we have the list. Essentially, Beulah Simpson, who's on the call today, thank you, from KPMG, pulled it together. Considerable input was also given from Bowman's and also Weber Wenzel on the business side. And you'll see the various companies, legal firms that actually assisted from across the region to pull together that information as well. So it was essentially very much a team effort, and you're going to shortly see a demonstration of the tool. But I think right from the start, there were so many people involved in this, and it's certainly a lot of women. So thank you to my sisters who have been part of that journey with us. And I think the saying is that it doesn't obviously take one country, but it takes the whole region to develop this. And I certainly hope that it's going to be well utilized and that we can continue to build upon it in the future.